Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Before we get into this episode, I want to let you know to please check your feed this Thursday. Don't wait till Monday. Check it Thursday because we will be bringing you the first movie verdicts episode for 2021. That's right. Robert Callahan is back with me as we do a deep dive into the troubling and brilliant movie that actually launched the career of Edward Norton. Of course, we're talking about the 1996 classic Primal Fear starring Richard Gere. So be sure to check your feed Thursday for that. And speaking of Robert Callahan, he is joining us today for the first time as a Monday mentor. Robert is a former prosecutor turned criminal defense lawyer with his own firm, Callahan King, here in Waco, which was recently recognized by Expertise as a top DUI law firm here in Waco. In addition to criminal law, their firm handles family and general litigation. Robert was recognized in 2016 as a National Black Lawyers Top 100 lawyer, and in 2020, he was one of just 2 recipients of the Percy Foreman Outstanding Lawyer of the Year Award given by the Texas Criminal Defense Lawyers Association and nominated by his peers. Quite an honor. On top of that, Robert is a leader and advocate for racial justice here in Waco and around the state, and he is a great, great friend. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Robert Callahan on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Give me a stare down. Hey there.
I'm not trying to.
We froze?
Yeah.
Robert Callahan joins us right now on the Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I got a lot of
messages and emails and phone calls and finally answered.
Yes, that's right. So for those of you, I can't imagine who, that haven't listened to one of our movie verdicts episodes yet, you need to do that because Robert is our co-host for the movie verdicts episodes that are in your feed. So if you haven't listened to those, go back. You get all the Robert you want right there in the movie. But then now you get to hear him in a different setting. So I'm excited.
Wait, there's more.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to say, first off, thanks, Robert, for doing all the episodes with us, the movie shows and all this, and then come in and do this one. It's just fun to get a chance to hang out, and particularly during this pandemic when things are crazy and we don't get to be together in person. But this is something you can do over Zoom and over video, and so it's fun to be able to do it. And so I appreciate you, and I know our listeners do as well. So thanks for doing all this.
Always my pleasure.
All right, so we're not going to talk about Primal Fear today or about Liar Liar today, as we have in the past. Although, yeah, so Robert and I recorded Primal Fear yesterday, so I don't know how it'll sequence out in terms of when that's in your feed, but it's either there now or it'll be there shortly, so be ready for that one. But let's just start off. Robert, tell us about your firm and your practice. Let us hear about that.
My firm is Callahan King. We're stationed here in Waco, Texas. We do work all throughout Central Texas, pretty much everything that touches McLennan County, and we've gone further than that. Our primary area of practice is criminal law. I would say probably 80% of what we do is criminal defense. We currently have 4 attorneys, myself, Chris King, my law partner, Cody Stapp, and Carrie Stoker. Carrie came on with us last year in May and has been doing a lot of good work with trust and estates, wills, planning like that. She's also doing criminal law. Cody is our family law guru. He's actually a former parole judge, and so we're really glad and lucky to have him. Chris and I handle a diverse practice of criminal cases, federal cases, misdemeanors, felonies. We've done literally every kind of case that you can imagine. And then we also do some other miscellaneous things, with, traffic tickets and 501c3s and, startups for businesses and things like that.
Awesome. And, how did you decide, and when did you decide to start your own firm, start your own practice, and kind of tell us what that was like to launch something from scratch? And I'm particularly interested because that's what I'm doing right now in my own company, in my own business over the last year. And so I just love to hear the stories of others that have branched out and jumped out and done their own thing. So tell us about that.
I started in private practice in 2011, and before that was serving in the district attorney's office here in McLennan County under John Segrist. John lost his election after 20 years in 2010, and I had been there 4 years, coming up on 4 years at that point in time. And so I came out of the DA's office when the new administration started, went into private practice. Actually didn't want to go into private practice. I just couldn't really imagine changing gears from being a prosecutor to a defense attorney or being just in business for myself because I didn't have any business acumen. And the more I thought and prayed about it, because that's an important point for our family, the more I just really felt that we were supposed to stay here in Waco and that we were supposed to raise the watermark on justice. I had another offer in another county on the border, paid good money, had some friends down there, but really didn't feel peace about it. And so I said, okay, I'm going to leap out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so my first office, I was in a 10 by 14 room with no windows on the 3rd floor of the Liberty Building downtown.
Yeah. And
for this Enneagram 8, outgoing extrovert, like that was just a slow death.
Yeah.
And, but it was, I just kept saying, okay, God, if you're calling me to do this, you got to make it work. I can't take on any new debt. I need to be able to find a place to work. It's got to be profitable right away. And sure enough, we just stair-stepped up and just took off. In 2013, I formed the partnership with Chris King. He was one of my early interns when he was in law school.
Yeah.
And then when he graduated, took the bar, we formed our partnership, Callahan King. And then we brought on Cody later. We had another attorney named Luke that was with us, Luke Giesecke. He's now a judge at the county court in Bosque County.
Awesome.
And we've just been really fortunate to have just really great people working with us throughout the years.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And congrats on the success and all that you guys are doing. That's exciting. So tell me a little bit about how COVID has impacted the practice, and in particular in the last couple of months, if any changes or seeing anything going one way or another. For context, we're recording January 28th. For people listening later or much later, obviously things change. So, but as of the end of January 2021, where do things stand for you all in terms of how COVID is impacting you?
It feels like things are a little bit on the rebound as far as COVID is concerned, from a business standpoint.
Yeah.
When the lockdown came at the early part of 2020, so March, it seemed like it brought the entire justice system to a halt.
Right.
And the police, at least locally, were even informed, don't bring anyone into the jail if it's not for a very serious offense.
Sure.
We just didn't have the room, the space for them. And then you don't want, people in close proximity, without the ability to quarantine, things like that. So it took about a month for the system to adapt. Yeah. And once that happened, it sort of kind of naturally progressed. It was hard for some judges that have gotten used to doing things a certain way, for some attorneys too. And we managed to get that going and got a pretty good rhythm. And once we got that ball rolling, we've been okay. Now, our firm has also been really fortunate because we were one of the ones that were fortunate to get the PPP loan. And that helped tremendously. But it definitely, there were less people that were able to afford attorneys, people prioritizing their financial needs. And so they were, asking for court appointed attorneys, and that's fine. It just seems like it took longer for them to kind of get into the system and get moving, and for traction to pick up and get the system rolling. Now that I think that we've sort of hit a stride, it's my hope that we'll take some of the good things that we've learned from technology and adaptability and incorporate those into the system going forward.
Sure. Yeah. And as a defense lawyer, do you worry about things like, in terms of getting justice for your clients, and obviously we're all kind of having to be flexible in the sense of like what would normally be a speedy trial, and all of that right now. But are there concerns that you think about in terms of, witnesses and their memories, or like evidence and what happens to that? Like what are some of the things that kind of are on your mind for your defendants right now, kind of going through this unusual scenario that's really slowing things down from getting their day in court?
Yeah. The big thing, you're absolutely right, is as time passes, cases don't get any better for either side. Right. And that tends to militate in favor of the defense in a criminal context. Okay. But absolutely right. I mean, getting witness statements and doing investigation, we have so much sort of, I won't call it extra time on our hands, but our time can be spent in different ways than it was traditionally. And so we have the ability to do more investigation, to dig deep down on, dig deeper on cases. And so it has been good and necessary to memorialize things wherever possible. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, locally, our district attorney's office has been pretty good about working with us to get nonviolent offenders out of jail, and our judges too. And so there's not a lot of our clients that are in jail in a situation where they're demanding their day in court and they can't get it. Right. Most of those people are on bond.
They're on bond.
Now, for those that are in jail, it creates an incredibly difficult situation for everyone, because the defendant does want his day in court, but at the same time, there's nothing more cruel and unusual than the idea of going forward with the trial and even possibly being found guilty not guilty at the end of it, and then finding out that you've got essentially a death sentence because you've contracted COVID in the courtroom. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you can't really win for losing in that context. And so I think our judges have been wise not to push jury trials. There was a lot of talk with that at the beginning of last summer, but I think that cooler heads have prevailed, and I think that we'll get through this, and hopefully everyone that wants a trial will still have the ability to get that.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, certainly something to continue following. And I know there's a whole other set of topics on that we could go down in terms of what COVID is like in the prisons and in the jails. And that's been a major story throughout Texas, and I'm sure around the country as well. I've seen a number of things about that. But I want to transition, because I want to take a lot of our time here and talk about and hear your thoughts on what's going on with the issue of race in the legal system, within the legal community, within law firms and lawyers, and what we can do as lawyers in our places of influence, spheres of influence, to help make progress. So I guess my first, and for context, for people that aren't familiar with you, Robert has been a leading advocate of racial justice and social justice here in McLennan County and in Waco, and has been a courageous and bold leader here in our community. And so I'm proud to have him as a friend, and very respectful of and interested in his thoughts on these matters. So, Robert, thanks for all that you do in this. So I guess first off,
thank you.
Since we're on the justice system, we're just talking about it. Let's just start there. And where do you feel like we are in a way that the justice system is handling or not the issue of administering justice as it pertains to someone's race? I mean, where does that sit right now?
Yeah, I think that the primary way that lands on those that are in the criminal justice system right now in 2021 with COVID being a thing is the interplay of COVID and those who are from at-risk populations and minorities who are disproportionately affected by it. So here locally, I was just pulling up some statistics, and 3 days ago, there were 61 inmates that were positive at the McLennan County Jail, 433 people quarantined.
Wow.
Inmates.
Yeah.
And so, that just lands differently when you talk about the disparity of disproportionate representation of minorities in the criminal system. Yeah. That lands differently on that population. And then, not to speak of, there's a lot of talk in healthcare about morbidity and mortality rates when it comes to minorities, that those groups are hit harder for different reasons. Mm-hmm. And so when you put all those things together, it really does cause a lot of issues. Yeah. I think that the constant struggle that we have as it concerns race, and for more context, too, I am an African American. I believe that when I started in 2011 in private practice, that I was one of 3 Black attorneys in the county. The other 2 were Mike Roberts and Lawrence Johnson. Mm-hmm. And I think that since then, now Lawrence Johnson actually passed, unfortunately, at the end of last year. But now I think that there's one in the district attorney's office, myself, 2 women that I know of, one paralegal that I know of. I mean, there's only, and I think maybe 2 other defense attorneys. So there's only a handful of us. Yeah. And so I've really been conscious of the need to steward my talents and my platform and my voice, to be an advocate. And, with Michael Morton, that's a big one. And it crosses racial boundaries, but the Michael Morton Act that was passed a few years back, around the tragic miscarriage of justice of Mr. Michael Morton, who was wrongfully sentenced, and we find out that the district attorney hid evidence. I just can't say enough about the importance of ethics when it comes to prosecutorial discretion. Right. And we talked about this in our movie review of Primal Fear last night. When everyone in the system sort of just sits in their silos and thinks, I'm just responsible for my part, and I'm not going to be concerned about what the system is doing overall, mm-hmm. or what the other players in the system are doing, it can lead to some real grave injustices. And prosecutors have tremendous discretion to decide whether to take a case or not, how to charge the case, what kind of plea deals to offer. in the minds of the jurors, they wear the white hats when you step into the courtroom. And so they come with this credibility. They get to speak first and last. And there's just tremendous authority there.
Right.
And, if it's not used wisely, it can be tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We have touched, I feel like, on Michael Morton a couple of different times in our other shows that we've done. And that continues to come up over and over again. And so thanks for that. When it comes to the protests of this past spring and summer after the killing of George Floyd and in response to other African Americans who were killed and murdered, and we sit now, time-wise removed from that somewhat since the protests have ceased or stopped. What is your biggest concern right now about kind of coming out of that? What if anything, are you optimistic about that came out of that? Maybe talk about both of those.
Yeah. The biggest concern that I have is that the conversation will die and that interest will fade away.
Right.
Because with both of those cases, it was obvious that the system didn't bring justice to bear on its own. What happened was that justice had to be crowdsourced. And it was only the voice of the people crying out on social media, putting pressure on different elected officials, leveraging their relationships, bringing awareness, protesting. Those were the things that brought all of we the people to bear on the government. Yeah. And when that happened, when there were arrests made, I think the conversation for a lot of people just sort of shifted with the news cycle, just sort of naturally. And, we've won, we've accomplished the thing, but there's just so much work still yet to be done. So that's my biggest fear. I think that another one that's not far from it is when we do start picking juries again, we haven't had a jury since Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
We haven't had a jury since George Floyd. We haven't had a jury since Breonna Taylor. Yeah. And this last year, especially being an election year, was incredibly divisive for a lot of people that aren't speaking to lifelong friends, aren't speaking to relatives. And I don't know how, I don't know how that hits different people that are going to be serving on a jury.
Sure.
On either side of the political aisle, there are a lot of people that have really strong feelings about race. And those things are going to have to be probed in the courtroom as we pick a jury. And we just don't have enough time, I think, in a week to talk to prospective jurors about how all those different things can affect them, how it can bias their opinions, how it can change the lens that they see things through.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Anything that you're optimistic or hopeful about coming out of everything over the summer? It's okay if you're not. We got to be real. Let's not make anything up.
Yeah. August of this last year, I was in a really dark place. I actually had a friend that sort of asked the same kind of question. And I said, I don't know what positive there is. Right. I think that what I've landed on is that there's always going to be. So when you look at the civil rights movement, this is a concept that I actually am borrowing from Jamar Tisby, who's a wonderful author, wrote The Color of Compromise and How to Fight Racism. And he points out that when you look at the civil rights movement, it was never the majority of people that got it. It was always this loud vocal minority that was protesting, this loud vocal minority that was pushing for things to change. That remnant is who we want and who we need to work with and need to ally with in order to make the long-standing change that needs to happen. So for me, I think that my encouragement, my hope has come in identifying that that's the situation, that there's a small handful of incredible, valuable relationships that can go deep, as we're all declaring ourselves publicly, what we think and what we believe. And that's where the change is going to come from, and from that community.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have, is there a, like if for you personally, and may not speak for everyone in the movement, but, is there a policy or an objective like for influencing, government officials or influencing, people in different spheres of influence and in different levels of power, that you feel like are, is at the top of the list of like, okay, this is a policy that has to change like tomorrow. Like this is what we have to have. Like what would be on that list, or what's kind of at the top of your list for stuff like that?
The biggest change that I feel like that needs to happen in the system, the criminal system, is starting with police reform. Yeah. And what we view as acceptable when it comes to police brutality. And I'm sure that you've probably heard of the 8 Can't Wait or seen that graphic. Yeah. Those types of reforms that are really considered progressive, but they shouldn't be considered progressive. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, banning the use of chokeholds, like that just goes to so many different cases, that the whole, Eric Garner, was back in 2016, 2017, and we've been saying I can't breathe ever since then. Right. And that's sort of become a mantra, and it's kind of just held over. But, definitely what we saw in George Floyd's case, those types of things, there's just not a legitimate reason that we can that I can think of for chokeholds to be legal. Yeah. So that, those kinds of, reforms, I think just on the local level, if we can't get some sort of national legislation passed, that somehow affects the states and how they police, then just on the local level and really on the state level, if we can make those kinds of changes, from the 8 Can't Wait campaign, then I think that would be a huge win. And I think that that's the closest fire for me, because at the end of the day, the goal is stop killing Black people in the course of detentions. Right. And so, it's a low bar, real simple. So if we can do that, yes, we put somebody on the moon. So surely,
right. We can do this, people.
So, beyond that, there's lots of other great, lofty aspirations, but those are the ones that I think are the most vital.
Yeah. And for the lawyers out there, I mean, this is a show for lawyers. How would you advise, and particularly young lawyers in their first few years of practice, how would you advise lawyers to use their skills, to use their license, to use, their abilities to impact change in this area?
I think one of the best resources that lawyers have is their talent. Their giftings, their time, their effort, and their energy. And being able to take cases pro bono or being able to take cases low bono and not even, I wouldn't deign to try to put a percentage of cases on that, but just, taking on cases, on occasion of any nature, if it's in your wheelhouse, in order to provide legal services. I think that that's a big thing. Using your relationships with elected officials. So many of us go on and become judges and become, in-house counsel or, advising counsel for the city, things like that, city attorneys. And so I think that, bringing awareness of these things, I think it's real easy for us to assume that we're all seeing the same news, all on the same page, understand the same information, and that's just not the case. Right. And so, creating intentional dialogue in your practice and in your places of work about how we view justice and the lens that we see things through, I think is is key. And, just really reading up on things like the new Jim Crow, Brian Stevenson's book. Now I can't even, it slipped my mind. There's a movie about
The Just Mercy.
Michael B. Thank you.
I got you. I got you.
But those kinds of things like that's happening now, right, today. That wasn't stuff that happened 50 years ago. So, yeah. Yeah.
And you were starting to talk about this a little bit earlier, specifically related to the Waco and McLennan County Bar and the number of minority lawyers, particularly African American lawyers here. And I'm curious just your thoughts about. I think I go around and talk to law firms all the time, and of course the push for and need to hire a more diverse group of lawyers is on everyone's mind. And I mean, corporate clients are pushing their law firms to do it, even if they weren't already doing it on their own, which most of them were, but are trying to. What do you see as some of the major hindrances or issues in lifting up and encouraging more African American and other minorities to both enter the field of practicing law and then to advance in their career in that area? What are some of your thoughts in that area?
I think that one of the biggest obstacles when it comes to hiring minorities and diverse employees is the metric that we use for judging who's a good candidate. And for example, coming out of law school, big law usually is looking at the top, 1, 5, maybe 10%, who's on law review, who has experience in moot court, mock trial, those kinds of things. Those are all great things, but they're dated. And I'll tell you, for example, and without tooting my own horn, I've gotten plenty of accolades over the years, and I was probably at the bottom of my class, honestly. I learned only, let me see, my daughter is now 9. So I think she was 6 when I learned that she has, an acute, dyslexia and, also, visual processing disorder. Yeah. And in the course of learning that about her, I discovered that I have it too, and she actually inherited it from me. Wow. Yeah. So I went through law school thinking that the letters do what they do for everybody. That was just
normal. That was normal. Yeah.
I'm 42 years old now, so this was 5 years ago.
Right.
And so I just did not do well on tests, but I knew. I mean, if you looked at my scores for certain classes, my advocacy classes, my constitutional law classes, I killed it. Yeah. But I could never hope to be top of the class. And so, I was on mock trial, but when you're in a big firm, if you're looking for academics alone, you're probably going to miss some talented people, regardless of what their skin color is. Right. And that's not to say that you're lowering your standards. I just think that you need to be looking beyond that. Right. While I'm on this topic, I tell students all the time, because I get to go back sometimes and teach at the undergraduate. I guest lecture a couple of classes, and I've spoken at the law school, and we have interns frequently that will work in our office and then come back and work for us. We've chosen 2-3 lawyers that way. I cannot say this enough. Anybody with enough time and preparation can learn the practice of law. But I can't teach you integrity. Yeah. If you don't have that, I can't teach you how to be a good person. And so you can follow me around And within 3 months, you're going to know all the lingo. You're going to know how to try a case in a courtroom. You're going to know how to offer evidence and make objections, and you're going to be impressive. And so to some extent, it doesn't matter where you graduate from law school,
right,
and what your, degree is and what your pedigree is and your credentials, your grades and all those things. I can teach you how to be a lawyer, but I can't teach you how to be moral. I can't teach you how to have that character. I can't teach character. And so I have hired people. I don't look at transcripts ever. Yeah. I've never once asked someone how they did on the bar exam, how they did in law school, how they did in undergrad, their SAT, LSAT. I don't care about that stuff. Yeah. What I care about is your character, and it has served us well. And so that's my big encouragement for all employers, is that if the culture of your office is more important than your bottom line, then look beyond your academics.
Yeah. I think that's well said. And, I think it's one of those things where it's so natural and easy because the resume comes in first and then the interview. Mm-hmm. It's the way it's been done for however many years. So the way we always do it. Mm-hmm. But because we do it that way, the first level of screening happens at the resume level, which is at the grades level, or at the, credential level or whatever. And you wonder, what would it look like if instead you had to spend 5 minutes talking to every candidate first as the initial screen before you ever saw a resume, and to get a sense, and not that you can tell someone's character in 5 minutes of a conversation necessarily, but just the order of the sequencing of how we do things. There's reasons for that too, efficiencies and whatever else, but that's where things get lost and dropped and missed out because good candidates fall through the cracks at some of those initial screenings. And I see it all the time. I mean, it happens all the time. Well, Robert, we could go on and on and on, and I'm sure that we will do this again. I hope you'll come back and we'll talk about more stuff. But for now, we'll leave it there. But I do have some rapid fire questions to wrap up our time today with, if that's all right.
Okay. All right. No pressure.
Name the one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Character.
There you go. What habit has been key to your success?
Hiring people that have the characteristics that I lack.
Cool. Your favorite app or productivity tool?
Facebook. we get a ton of business on Facebook.
There you go.
Productivity, I would say Google Sheets.
Google Sheets. Yeah. Awesome. Your favorite social distancing activity?
Hanging out with friends on the front yard or around fire pit, drinking wine.
Yes. Awesome. And then lastly, I should have this in front of me. Your favorite legal movie?
Ooh.
I can pull up your rankings right here from what you've told me.
So
this is a moment.
This is a different question.
It's true.
So I feel like my favorite legal movie is My Cousin Vinny.
Yes.
But last night I gave the highest rating to Primal Fear in terms of legal movies.
You did.
100%. All 10s from the Russian Judge. Won't go back.
You had also given a 100 to Hamilton.
Yeah, that's true.
Which, we kind of stretched that into a legal movie just to have fun doing Hamilton. But
it counts. Man. We're lawyers.
So, awesome. Well, Robert, where can people find you, read your stuff? If they need to refer a criminal case to you here in Waco or need local counsel, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, appreciate it. So I'm on the socials. I'm on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. I think my handles on Facebook and Twitter are at Callahan Waco. And I think that it's pretty close to that on Facebook. Also email you. Feel free to email me at callahankinglaw@gmail.com. That's CALLAHAN KINGLAW@gmail.com. And I have lots to say on all of those platforms. So, it won't be hard to find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for doing this. And, we will talk to you very soon. I know.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, my thanks again to Robert Callahan for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you rate and review the podcast in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget to come back this Thursday for our deep dive into Primal Fear on the first movie verdicts episode of the year. And Robert will be back here for that. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.